63 isn't a milestone. It just sounds like exhaustion. I had grown comfortable with the quiet. Comfortable in a lonely way. Ever since Ezra stopped talking to me. The coffee was always black now. No sugar. No cream. Just bitter and honest. Like everything else had become. The knock came on a Tuesday morning while I sat on the porch swing, watching the stubborn grass refuse to green up despite my daily watering. The sound startled me from my crossword puzzle. Pen hovering over 7 across. Betrayal. When I opened the door, there was only a brown box with a blue ribbon, sitting on the welcome mat like a small, patient animal. No doubt about the handwriting. I hadn't seen it in 3 years. But I would recognize it even with my eyes closed. Ezra's careful engineer's script. Each letter measured and precise. The card was simple white stock. Expensive. Happy birthday, Mom. Let's start over. Inside the box. 12 cookies shaped like stars. Each one perfect and golden. They smelled like vanilla and almonds, the way I used to make them when he was small. Before everything went wrong. Before he decided I wasn't worth his time anymore. I should have been happy. Any mother would be. After 3 years of silence. Through my pneumonia last winter. Through Sarah's funeral, when he didn't even send flowers. Here was an olive branch, wrapped in blue ribbon. But something cold settled in my stomach, as I held one of those perfect stars. Pride. Maybe. Fear. Possibly. Or something quieter than both. The phone rang that afternoon, while I was still staring at the unopened box. Ruth. My former mother-in-law. From my first marriage. The one who stayed close even after Richard died. She was coming over for tea, she said. Bringing her crossword book and that infectious laugh that could fill up a whole room. Ruth was the kind of woman who never let you feel sorry for yourself for too long. When she arrived, I did what any decent person would do. I offered her the cookies. Not all of them. Just 6. The star-shaped ones seemed to call to her, and she chose them with delight, like a child in a candy store. She ate 3 right there at my kitchen table, praising the almond flavor between sips of Earl Grey. I kept one for myself and stored the rest in the refrigerator. Something held me back from eating mine. Call it intuition. Call it stubbornness. Call it the bitter taste that 3 years of silence leaves in your mouth. The phone call came that evening. Ezra's voice. Controlled as always. Mom. Did you get my package? Yes, I said. Thank you. They look beautiful. Did you eat them? I shared them with Ruth. She loved them. The silence stretched like a held breath. When he spoke again, his voice had changed. Sharp now. Cold. You gave them to Ruth? Mom. What did you do? They weren't for her. They were only for you. Just you. The line went dead. I sat in my kitchen, staring at that one star-shaped cookie I'd saved, and felt the first real fear I'd known in years. Not the everyday fear of growing old alone, but something deeper. Something that made my hands shake as I reached for the phone to call Ruth. No answer. The next morning brought rain and a call from Laya, Ezra's wife. Her voice was small and frightened. Ruth was in the hospital. Emergency room. Severe nausea. Disorientation. Collapse. The doctors were running tests, she said. Ruth had mentioned eating cookies that I'd brought over. I drove to the hospital through sheets of rain that turned the world gray and uncertain. Ruth lay small in the white bed, her usually bright eyes clouded with confusion. When she saw me, she managed a weak smile. Marlene, dear. Such a fuss over nothing. Just my silly old stomach acting up. But I saw the IV drip. The monitors. The worry lines around Laya's eyes. This wasn't nothing. That afternoon, while Ruth slept and Leah paced the hallway, I went home and searched my kitchen like a detective. In the trash can, beneath the coffee grounds and yesterday's newspaper, I found a small plastic vial. No label. White powder residue inside. It wasn't mine. The vial was the kind they use for vitamins. The kind Ezra would have access to in his chemical engineering work. I called Janelle Marraro, my old friend from the library, who now worked at the county lab. Personal favor, I said. Could she test something for me? No questions asked. While I waited for results, memories surfaced like oil on water. Ezra, as a child. Meticulous and particular. The way he watched people eat, studying their faces. How he reacted when things didn't go according to his plans. The tantrums that weren't quite tantrums, more like cold calculations of fury. I remembered the way he stood perfectly still when disappointed, as if storing it up for later. Janelle called on Thursday. Her voice was careful, professional. Marlene, there's something in that cookie. Traces of a compound related to aconitum. Monk's hood. It's extremely toxic. Very rare to find in food. This definitely wasn't an accident. The world tilted. I set the phone down and stared at my hands. These 70-year-old hands that had changed his diapers, packed his lunches, signed permission slips and report cards. These hands that he had tried to poison. I called Detective Reyes that afternoon. Not because I wanted to. Because I had to. The next day, I drove to Ezra's house in the suburbs. The one with the perfect lawn and the 3-car garage. I brought a digital recorder in my purse. The kind I used for dictating grocery lists. Leah answered the door, her face drawn with worry about Ruth. Ezra was in his home office, surrounded by chemistry journals and computer monitors. He looked up when I entered, his expression carefully neutral. Hello? Mom. How's Ruth? She's alive, I said. No thanks to you. He blinked once, slowly. I'm not sure what you mean. Ruth liked the star-shaped cookies best, I said, watching his face. She told me they reminded her of Christmas. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Ruth chose the stars. He couldn't have known the shapes unless he'd made them himself. I know about the monk's hood. Ezra. He leaned back in his chair, studying me with those pale eyes that had once looked up at me with such trust. I don't know what you're talking about. But he did. I could see it in the way his breathing changed. Became too careful. In the way, his fingers drummed once against his desk, and then went still. I noticed the small plastic vial on his counter, partially hidden behind a coffee maker. Identical to the one I'd found in my trash. Why? I asked. Just tell me why. For the first time in our conversation, his composure cracked. Because you never understood anything. Because you always interfered. Because you never knew when to stay out of things that weren't your business. Like staying alive? I asked. He said nothing. But his silence was louder than any confession. I left that recording with Detective Reyes and drove straight to the hospital to tell Leah everything. She cried in my kitchen later that evening, admitting she'd noticed changes in Ezra over the past year. Strange notes in his journal about plant extracts, dried herbs she didn't recognize, posts he'd made under fake names on herbal medicine forums, describing dosages and interactions that matched Ruth's blood work perfectly. They arrested him the next morning. Quietly, calmly, like he'd rehearsed it. Like everything else in his methodical life. Ruth recovered slowly. Confused at first, then grateful, then quiet. When I visited her at home a week later, she squeezed my hand once and said, "You saved my life, dear." Then we sat in comfortable silence, Two old women who understood that some truths are too heavy for words. I took that last cookie from my refrigerator and sealed it in an evidence bag Detective Reyes had given me. Then I put it in a fireproof box along with the card that read, "Happy birthday, Mom. Let's start over." I locked the box and placed it on the highest shelf in my closet. Not to forget, but to remember what I almost missed. The house felt different now. Still quiet, but not lonely. The silence had substance to it, like the pause between musical notes that makes the melody possible. I found myself humming while I made coffee, watering the stubborn grass with something approaching hope. Some mornings I catch myself listening for the phone to ring, for Ezra's voice asking if I got his package. But those mornings are becoming fewer. Ruth calls instead, checking on me the way family should. Real family. The kind you choose, rather than the kind that chooses you for target practice. I've started sleeping better. The dreams about perfect star-shaped cookies have faded, replaced by ordinary dreams about ordinary things. Gardens that might actually grow. Phone calls that bring good news. Sons who send flowers instead of poison. Being a mother doesn't end just because your child changes. But sometimes, to protect what's left of yourself, you have to accept a brutal truth. That the child you raised can become the man who sends you a box of poison wrapped in blue ribbon. That love isn't always enough. That sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to be destroyed by someone else's darkness. The crossword puzzle still sits on my porch table. 7. Across unfinished. Betrayal. 6 letters. But I've learned that some words are better left blank. Some truths are better faced in the bright light of day rather than filled in with pencil marks that can be erased. I water my grass every morning now. And sometimes, I see small green shoots pushing through the stubborn earth. Not because I changed anything about my technique, but because I finally stopped expecting immediate results. Some things take time to grow. Some things require patience and the right conditions. Like trust. Like healing. Like the quiet courage it takes to choose yourself when everyone else expects you to disappear. 3 months later, I received a letter from Ezra's attorney. A formal apology. Typed and notarized. No mention of intent or motive. Just legal words designed to minimize liability. I read it once and filed it away with the rest of the evidence. Some apologies arrived too late to matter. Ruth and I have tea every Thursday now. We work on crossword puzzles together. Our gray heads bent over the newspaper, arguing about 7-letter words for resilience. She never mentions the cookies. And I never mention the fear that still occasionally wakes me at 3 in the morning. We've learned that some silences are full of understanding rather than emptiness. Laya divorced Ezra while he was in custody. She comes by sometimes, usually on Sundays, bringing grocery store flowers and updates about her new job across town. She's studying to be a nurse, she tells me. She wants to help people heal. I think she's trying to heal herself too. In small, careful doses. The way you recover from any kind of poisoning. The trial will be next year. I'll testify if I have to. Though the thought still makes my hands shake. Not from fear of Ezra anymore, but from the strange grief of watching your own child face the consequences of choices you couldn't prevent. Motherhood, I've learned, includes mourning the person your child might have been. I keep the fireproof box on the high shelf, but I don't think about it much anymore. Instead, I think about the green shoots in my lawn, about Ruth's laughter over tea, about Laya's determination to build something good from the wreckage. I think about the way morning light fills my kitchen now, unfiltered by the weight of waiting for phone calls that never came. Some evenings, when the air is soft and the day's heat is beginning to lift, I sit on my porch swing and watch the world settle into dusk. The crossword puzzle lies forgotten beside me. I've discovered that some questions don't need answers. Some spaces are better left unfilled. The quiet I live in now is different from the silence that came before. It's not the absence of sound but the presence of peace. It's the difference between holding your breath and breathing freely, between waiting for love and accepting it from the people who know how to give it without conditions or hidden costs. Tomorrow I'll water the grass again. I'll make coffee. Black and honest. I'll call Ruth to confirm our Thursday tea date and maybe drive to the farmer's market for fresh flowers. Small things. Ordinary things. The kind of things that make a life worth living when you finally understand that you deserve to live it. I turn off the porch light and walk down the hallway. Not sure if I'll ever feel completely safe again. Or if I ever really was safe before. But safety, I'm learning, isn't the same as peace. And peace is something you build, one small choice at a time, one boundary at a time, one morning of watering stubborn grass at a time. The house settles around me as I prepare for bed. Its familiar creaks and sighs no longer sounding like loneliness, but like home. Real home. The kind where the only surprises are good ones. Where the only gifts come from people who wish you well. And if that means my family is smaller now, if it means holidays are quieter and birthdays pass without perfect star-shaped cookies, well, I've learned to prefer the company of people who would never dream of putting poison in my food. Even if that company sometimes consists of just me, my crossword puzzles, and the slow green promise of grass that refuses to give up. Some mornings I catch myself humming while I make breakfast. Not any particular song. Just contentment given voice. It's a sound I hadn't heard from myself in years. The sound of a woman who finally knows the difference between being alone and being free.